At our family reunion, sister gave everyone DNA kits as fun gifts. 3 weeks later, Dad called me screaming, "What did you do?" I said, "I didn't do anything, Dad." But apparently someone at that table isn't who they say they are. He hung up. Mom called next. She was crying. Then Grandma called, said, "Finally. I've been waiting 30 years for this call. My name is Sienna Evans. I'm 34 years old. 3 weeks ago, my sister gave everyone at our family reunion a DNA kit as a fun gift. Nobody thought twice about it. We laughed, spit into little tubes, sealed them up, and went back to eating potato salad. Then the results came back. My father called me screaming. "What did you do?" I told him, "I didn't do anything, Dad, but apparently someone at that table isn't who they say they are." He hung up. My mother called next. She was crying. Not the kind of crying that means she's hurt, but the kind that means she's been caught. And then my grandmother called. 80 years old, voice steady as stone, and she said 5 words I will never forget. "Finally, I've been waiting 30 years for this call." Now, let me take you back to July 4th weekend. The day my sister walked into the reunion carrying a box full of DNA kits and a smile that had no idea what it was about to do. In Cedarville, Ohio, population 9,000 and change, the Evans family was the family. My father, Gerald Evans, had been a deacon at Grace Community Church for over 20 years. Every Sunday, front pew, left side. My mother, Donna, ran the annual bake sale and organized the church potluck like a 4-star general. People in town talked about my parents the way you talk about a house with a perfect lawn. Admiring, maybe a little envious, never questioning what was underneath. My older brother, Marcus, was the golden child. 36, already a regional sales manager, married with 2 kids, the kind of son my father could parade around at church functions. My younger sister, Brooke, was the baby, 27, bubbly, the one everyone found charming. And then there was me, the middle one. The registered nurse who worked double shifts at County General bought her own house at 29 and somehow still got introduced at family gatherings as our responsible one. That sounds like a compliment. It wasn't. It was a job title. It meant Sienna won't cause problems. Sienna will smooth things over. Sienna will keep her mouth shut when it matters. I was good at it too. Years of practice. My grandmother, Ruth Evans, lived alone in a small house on Maple Lane, the one she'd been in for 45 years. She used to come to every family dinner, every birthday, every holiday. But somewhere around the time I turned 14, the invitations started thinning. Nobody said why. If I asked, my mother would wave her hand and say, "Grandma's getting older. She likes her quiet." I believed that for 20 years. I believed a lot of things for 20 years. There were signs. There are always signs. When I was 10, I woke up past midnight to the sound of my parents arguing behind their bedroom door. My mother's voice was high, cracked, the kind of pitch that lives right next to panic. My father's was low and flat, controlled, the way a man sounds when he's done explaining and has moved on to warning. I pressed my ear against the hallway wall. I couldn't catch full sentences, just fragments. "You promised it's over. Don't you ever bring that up again." The next morning, pancakes, smiles. My father read the paper. My mother hummed while flipping eggs. I looked at them and thought, maybe I dreamed it. I didn't dream it. I just learned at 10 years old that in this family mornings erase midnights. There was the time Grandma Ruth drove over unannounced when I was 12. She marched straight past my mother through the kitchen and into the garage where my father was organizing tools. The door slammed. Voices rose. My mother turned the TV volume up and told us to finish our homework. Ruth left 20 minutes later. She didn't say goodbye to us. She didn't come back for 6 months. No one explained. No one asked. And then there was the letter. I was 14 looking for stamps in my father's desk drawer and I found an envelope tucked beneath a stack of old bank statements. Inside a single-page handwritten neat cursive. I didn't read much, just the closing line and the signature. "I'll always love you. K." I put it back. I closed the drawer. I never mentioned it until now. July 4th weekend, the annual Evans family reunion. My parents' backyard was set up the way it always was, folding tables with checkered cloths, a charcoal grill smoking in the corner, miniature flags stuck into the centerpieces. About 25 people showed up. Aunts, uncles, cousins, a few neighbors who had been coming so long they were basically family. My father stood at the grill in his world's best dad apron, flipping burgers, shaking hands, laughing at jokes he'd told 100 times. Brooke arrived late, carrying a big cardboard box under one arm and a grin that practically glowed. "Okay, everyone," she announced, setting the box on the picnic table. "I got us something fun." She pulled out the kits. 12 of them stacked neatly. The bright-colored boxes you've seen advertised on every commercial break since Thanksgiving. DNA testing kits. "We can find out where we're really from," she said, bouncing on her toes. Most of the family laughed. Aunt June said she already knew she was Irish. Uncle Harold spit into the tube right there at the table. No instructions needed. My father didn't move. He stood at the grill, spatula in hand, and stared at the box like Brooke had set a live grenade on the table. "I don't need a machine to tell me who I am," he said. "Relax, Dad. It just tells you your ancestry percentages," Brooke said. "Like how much Irish or German you are. It's just for fun." I watched his shoulders drop just slightly. "Ancestry percentages, that's all." He picked up a kit, turned it over once, and set it on the side table next to his plate. My mother did the same. Neither of them opened the packaging for the rest of the afternoon. Here's what I didn't know at the time. Gerald and Donna never sent their samples in. They took the kits home and the kits went into a drawer. My father figured that was enough. If he didn't spit in the tube, there was nothing to find. He was 60 years old. He didn't know these platforms have a feature called DNA relatives. That the moment any of his children submitted a sample, the system would automatically match us against every other person in the database, including a 31-year-old carpenter 2 hours east who had submitted his own sample 2 years earlier, searching for the father who had abandoned him. Gerald didn't need to test. We did it for him. And Grandma Ruth, sitting in a lawn chair at the far end of the yard, a glass of sweet tea in her hand, looked at Brooke, looked at the box of DNA kits, and smiled. A real smile, the first one I'd seen from her in years. I didn't understand that smile then. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, I was sitting on my couch in scrubs after a 12-hour shift when the notification popped up on my phone. "Results ready." I opened the app. Ethnicity estimate 74% Northwestern European, 18% British and Irish, 8% broadly European. Boring expected. Then I tapped DNA relatives, and the air left my lungs. At the top of my match list, above the cousins and distant connections I expected, was a name I had never seen in my life. Nathan H. 25.3% shared DNA. Relationship estimate, half-sibling. I stared at it, read it again. Half-sibling. That means we share one biological parent. I don't have a half-sibling. I have Marcus and Brooke. And that's it. That has always been it. I scrolled down. The match was 3 days old. Nathan had already seen our connection, and he had sent me a message. I tapped it open. "Hi, I know this is strange. I've been looking for my biological father for 15 years. My mom never told me his name. 3 days ago, your DNA matched mine as a half-sibling. I don't want to cause trouble. I just want to know, am I your brother?" I read that message 4 times. Each time, the last sentence hit harder. Am I your brother? This wasn't data on a screen. This was a 31-year-old man sitting somewhere watching his phone, waiting for an answer to the simplest question of his life. I called Brooke. Her voice was already shaking. "Sienna, did you see? I matched him too. Both of us half-sibling. Both of us. Same result, same father." Before either of us could say another word, my phone buzzed. "Incoming call, Dad." His voice hit me before I could even say hello. "What did you do? What did you and your sister do?" "I didn't do anything, Dad. But apparently someone at that table isn't who they say they are." Silence. 5 full seconds. I counted. In my entire life, I had never heard Gerald Evans go silent for that long. Then, and this is the part that told me everything. He didn't say, "Who's Nathan?" He didn't say, there must be some mistake. Instead, he said, how is he in the system? How the hell is he in the system? He knew who Nathan was. He just never imagined Nathan would be searchable. In Gerald's mind, his secret was buried in a town 2 hours east with a woman who'd been silent for 30 years. He didn't understand that the moment his own children spit into a tube, the database did the rest. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Lower, controlled, the midnight voice from behind the bedroom door, the one I hadn't heard since I was 10. Listen to me carefully, Sienna. That man, whoever he is, you do not respond to him. You tell him the test was contaminated. You tell him it was a lab error, a glitch. Do you understand me? My throat tightened. Dad, he's asking if he's my brother. He is nobody. And if you respond to him, you are choosing a stranger over your own family. He's not a stranger. He shares our DNA. Delete the message. Delete the app. And do not say a word to anyone else. He hung up. I sat there, phone in one hand, staring at Nathan's message still glowing on the screen. My father wasn't asking me to keep a secret. He was asking me to write one. He was asking me to look a man in the eye. A man who'd spent 15 years searching and tell him, you don't exist. I'm a nurse. My entire career is built on one principle. Do no harm. And my father had just asked me to do harm. Donna called 40 minutes later. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. She was crying, soft, practiced crying. The kind with pauses built in for maximum effect. Sienna, honey, please don't respond to that man. Your father has high blood pressure. You know that this kind of stress could put him in the hospital. You're a nurse. You understand? Using my profession against me, that was new. Mom, I said, keeping my voice flat. Did you know? Silence. A long wet inhale. Then it's complicated, complicated. That word, the padlock every family uses when the truth is too ugly to carry. How long, Sienna? This isn't the time to how long, Mom? She didn't answer. She just cried harder. I hung up. An hour later, Brooke called, panicked. Sienna, Dad just called me. He said if this doesn't stop, he's selling Grandma's house. He said she needs professional care. He said, Pine Ridge. Pine Ridge, the assisted living facility on Route 9, the one everyone in Cedarville whispered about. My grandmother's house, the one she'd lived in for 45 years, was co-owned by Gerald. He'd put his name on the deed 15 years ago when he helped her refinance after Grandpa passed. He had leverage and he was using it. Then at 8:47 p.m., my phone rang one more time. The screen read, Grandma Ruth. Her voice was steady, warm, completely calm. Finally, she said. I've been waiting 30 years for this call. Grandma, Dad is threatening to sell your house. Let him try. I'd rather sleep in a cardboard box than spend one more day protecting his lie. A pause. Come to my house, Sienna. I'll tell you everything. Don't tell your father you're coming. I drove there in the dark. Her porch light was already on. Okay, I need to pause here for a second because right now I'm sitting in my car in my grandmother's driveway and my hands are shaking. Not from fear, from the weight of what's about to happen. I'm about to hear something my family spent 30 years burying. If you've ever had that moment, the one where you know everything is about to change, drop the word finally in the comments. And if this story already has your stomach in knots, hit that subscribe button because what Grandma told me next. I still can't believe my own father did this. Grandma Ruth's kitchen smelled like it always did. Coffee grounds and cedar. She had 2 mugs already set on the table when I walked in. No small talk, no. How are you? She sat down across from me, folded her hands, and started talking like she'd been rehearsing this conversation for decades. Maybe she had. 30 years ago, she said, your father was a branch manager at First Mutual Savings on Main Street. He was 30, ambitious, charming when he needed to be. A woman named Karen Holt started working there as a teller. She paused, took a sip. They had an affair, 6 months, maybe longer. I don't know the exact timeline. Karen got pregnant. She told your father and your father, my son, panicked. Ruth's jaw tightened. She set her mug down carefully like she didn't trust her hands. He gave her a choice: silence or she loses her job. He was her manager, Sienna. She was 25. No degree, no savings, pregnant. She didn't have a choice. She quit. Moved 2 hours east to a town called Briarfield. Had the baby alone. Nathan, I whispered. Nathan, Ruth confirmed. Your brother. I pressed my palms flat against the table. The kitchen was quiet except for the wall clock ticking above the stove. How do you know all this? Because Karen called me about a year after Nathan was born. She was desperate, working double shifts at a grocery store, baby in daycare she couldn't afford. She asked me for help. She said your father wouldn't return her calls. Ruth's eyes met mine. I wanted to help her. I was going to. And then Gerald found out I'd spoken to her. She took a slow breath. He told me, if you say one word, I will never let you see your grandchildren again. Your mother found out 5 years later, Ruth continued. Sienna, you were about 8. Donna found a phone bill with calls to a number she didn't recognize. She traced it back to Karen, confronted Gerald. And your father did what your father does. He swore it was over. Swore he'd never spoken to Karen since she left. Begged, cried even. And Gerald Evans does not cry unless it serves a purpose. Ruth leaned forward. Donna made a deal. She would stay. She would keep the family together, but Gerald was never to contact Karen again, and the affair was never ever to be spoken of. That's it. She just stayed. Sienna, your mother quit teaching before Marcus was born. Gerald wanted her home. By the time she found out, she had 3 children. No income, no career, no savings. She couldn't go back to the classroom after 10 years out. She had nowhere to go. Ruth paused. Staying was survival. I understand that part. Her voice hardened. The part I don't understand is what came next. When I tried to tell the truth, when I pushed Gerald to acknowledge Nathan to at least send money, anything, Donna helped him shut me down. Together, they told Marcus and Brooke I was getting confused. They started skipping my invitations, stopping by less, telling neighbors I was slowing down. She tapped her temple with one finger. They didn't just bury the secret, Sienna. They buried me. And they used my own grandchildren to do it. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not sadness exactly. Something closer to fury. A slow, deep, structural kind of fury. The kind that doesn't shout. It just holds steady and refuses to look away. Grandma, I said, why now? Why did you wait? She almost smiled, almost. I didn't wait because I wanted to. Ruth said, I waited because every time I tried to speak, they made me disappear a little more. After a while, I realized they would never let me be the messenger. If the truth came from me, they'd just call me senile again, and everyone would believe them. She wrapped both hands around her mug. 2 years ago, I read an article in the Cedarville Gazette about a woman who found her birth father through one of these DNA websites. The article explained how it works. You send in a sample and the system matches you against everyone else in the database: siblings, parents, children. It doesn't matter who sent what. If the DNA connects, the system finds it. She looked at me over the rim of her mug. That's when I understood. Gerald would never take a test himself. He's too careful for that. But he doesn't need to. If his children take the test, and if Nathan is already in the database, the match happens through you, through shared blood. You researched this, I said. I went to the library. I used the computer there. I read everything I could find. She set the mug down. I'm 78, Sienna. I'm not stupid. Brooke came to visit me in April. She started talking about these kits, how she'd done one herself, found out she was 11% Scandinavian. She was so excited, and I told her it sounded like a wonderful gift idea. That's all I said. Brooke made the decision herself. I just didn't discourage it. I sat back in my chair. Everything was clicking into place. Ruth's smile at the reunion, Gerald's hesitation at the grill, his refusal to open the kit, Donna quietly pocketing hers. DNA doesn't lie, Ruth said softly. And DNA doesn't get confused. They can call me crazy. They can't call a 25% match crazy. She reached across the table and held my wrist. Nathan sent his sample in 2 years ago. He's been searching. He just needed the other half to show up. The other half. That was us. I messaged Nathan back that night at 11:14 p.m. I typed and deleted 6 different versions before settling on the simplest one I could manage. Yes, I think you are. He replied in 9 minutes. We moved to a video call within the hour. The face that appeared on my screen stopped my breath. He had Gerald's jawline, the same square set, the same slight cleft in the chin, but his eyes were different. Softer brown where Gerald's were gray. And when he smiled, nervous, careful, I saw something my father's face had never carried. Warmth without conditions. I'm Nathan Hole, he said. I'm 31. I live in Briarfield. I'm a carpenter. His apartment was small. Behind him, I could see a child's drawing taped to the wall, stick figures and crayon, a big sun, a house with a red door. I have a daughter, he said, following my eyes. Her name is Lily. She's 5. Her mom left when she was 2. It's just us. He told me his story in pieces. Karen raised him alone. Worked at the grocery store, then a dry cleaner, then a diner. Never married. Never told Nathan his father's name. All she ever said was he chose his other family. I did the DNA test 2 years ago. Nathan said nobody matched. No siblings, no father, nothing. I figured maybe he was dead or maybe he just never took one. Then 3 weeks ago, 3 people matched at once. Half sibling, half sibling, half sibling. He held up his phone. An old photograph creased and faded. A young man in a bank uniform named Badge clipped to his shirt pocket. My mom kept one picture of him. She never told me his name, but that's him, right? It was Gerald, 25 years old, smiling in a way I barely recognized. Young and unguarded. Yeah, I said. That's him. That's our father. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, Gerald had already started working the phones. Marcus called at 7 a.m., voice tight. Sienna, what the hell is going on? Dad says you're talking to some random guy online who claims he's family. He's not random, Marcus. He matched all 3 of us. Dad says DNA tests make mistakes all the time. 3 separate matches at half-sibling range is not a mistake. Marcus went quiet. Then, Dad's really upset. Can you just let this go? I couldn't, and Gerald knew I couldn't, so he escalated. Brooke texted me at noon. Sienna, I just left Mom and Dad's. Dad was on the phone with a real estate lawyer. I heard him asking about selling a co-owned property. He's serious about Grandma's house. Donna called an hour later. Her voice was different now. No tears, no trembling, cold. Your father has already spoken to an attorney about the house on Maple Lane. He's serious, Sienna. If you don't stop this, she'll be in Pine Ridge by Christmas. Pine Ridge? She said it like it was a weather forecast. I called Ruth. She already knew. He called me this morning. She said, same threat he used 30 years ago. Keep your mouth shut or I'll take everything. That boy only has one trick, Sienna. Grandma, aren't you scared? I'm 78 years old. I've spent 30 years watching my son pretend that child doesn't exist. What's he going to take from me that he hasn't already taken? I hung up and sat on my kitchen floor. Gerald was threatening to sell Ruth's home. Nathan was still waiting, checking his phone. And every hour I stayed silent. I was becoming the thing I hated most. 4 days had passed. I opened Nathan's message thread and started typing. Gerald called a family dinner for the following Saturday. His voice on the phone was calm, almost pleasant, the deacon voice. I think we all need to sit down together and clear the air as a family. I knew exactly what this was. Gerald didn't clear air. He controlled rooms. But I went because if I didn't show up, Gerald would give his version to 20 people without me there to say a word. The dining room at my parents' house was full. 2 long tables pushed together. Aunt June, Uncle Harold, 4 cousins, Marcus and his wife Brooke, a few family friends. 22 people, including my parents. The good china was out. The overhead light felt surgical. Gerald sat at the head of the table, hands folded, jaw set. Donna sat beside him. Her eyes were red. A preview. I realized she'd been precrying to set the tone. I took the only open seat at the far end facing my father. Gerald waited until the room settled, then spoke. His voice was steady, measured, pulpit-trained. I asked everyone here tonight because our family is under attack. He paused. Let the word land. Over the past week, some of you may have heard rumors, accusations based on a DNA test that Brooke, with good intentions, gave out at the reunion. He didn't mention Nathan, didn't mention Karen, didn't mention a 30-year affair. I want to be clear. These results are unreliable, and my daughter Sienna has chosen to pursue this fantasy instead of protecting her family. Every head in the room turned toward me. Aunt June clicked her tongue. Uncle Harold shook his head. Marcus stared at the table. Brooke looked like she wanted to dissolve. Gerald leaned forward. I have given this family everything, and this is how I'm repaid. I opened my mouth and the front door opened first. The door hadn't opened yet. Gerald still had the floor. He turned to me directly, voice rising just enough to fill the room without shouting. Sienna, I'm going to give you a chance right here in front of this family to put this to rest. Tell everyone that you made a mistake, that you got carried away by a test result you don't fully understand. Gerald, my mother started. Let her answer, Donna. I looked around the table. 21 faces staring at me, some sympathetic, most skeptical. Aunt June had her arms crossed. Uncle Harold was already shaking his head. Well, Gerald said, before I could speak. Donna stood up, tears rolling, hands pressed to her chest. I have given my entire life to this family, she said, voice breaking at the edges. I quit my career. I raised 3 children. I made this home. And now my own daughter is tearing it apart because of some website. She turned to me. If you love us, Sienna, you will stop this right now. Aunt June reached over and squeezed Donna's arm. She's right, honey. Your mother doesn't deserve this. A cousin I barely talked to muttered. This is embarrassing. Marcus spoke without looking up. Sienna, just apologize. Please, let's move on. I sat there. 22 people. Not one of them had asked me what the results actually said. Not one had asked who Nathan was. They'd already decided I was the problem because Gerald had told them first. My father was winning. And the look on his face, that calm, righteous certainty, told me he knew it. I was about to speak when I heard footsteps on the front porch, slow, deliberate. Then the creak of the door handle and Ruth walked in. She wasn't invited. She hadn't been invited to a family dinner in over a year. But Ruth walked through that front door like she owned every inch of the house she'd helped pay for 30 years ago. She wore a navy cardigan buttoned to the top. She held a cane in her right hand in a thick manila envelope, corners bent and edges yellowed, tucked under her left arm. Her white hair was pinned back neatly, and her eyes, sharp, clear, and absolutely furious, swept the room in a single pass. Gerald stood. Mom, this doesn't concern you. It has concerned me for 30 years. Gerald, sit down. The room went silent. Not the polite silence of dinner conversation pausing. The deep structural silence of a room realizing the person with the most authority just arrived. Ruth was the matriarch. She was the oldest person in that room. Gerald was her son, not the other way around. And everyone at that table, no matter how loyal to Gerald, understood on some bone-deep level that when Ruth spoke, the hierarchy shifted. She walked slowly, deliberately past Aunt June, past Uncle Harold, past Marcus and Brooke, all the way to the far end of the table. She pulled out the chair next to mine and sat down. Then she placed the manila envelope on the table. It was old, creased at the fold. The kind of envelope that had been opened and sealed and opened again over years, maybe decades. She set it down gently and rested both hands on top of it. Gerald's eyes locked onto it, and for the first time that night, I saw something crack in his face. Just a flicker, just a half second, but I caught it. He knew what was in that envelope. Donna's hand moved under the table and gripped his arm. Ruth didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every person in that room was already leaning in. She looked around the table slowly, taking in each face, and then she spoke. 30 years ago, my son had an affair with a woman named Karen Hole. She worked at his bank. She got pregnant. Gerald told her to keep quiet or lose her job. She left town and raised his son alone. The room didn't move. I don't think anyone breathed. Gerald pushed his chair back and stood. Mom, stop. You're confused. You don't know what you're. I am 78 years old, Ruth said, and her voice didn't waver by a single note. I am not confused. I am tired. Tired of being quiet. Tired of being called crazy. And tired of watching my son sit in this chair and play the victim while his child grew up without a father. She turned to the rest of the family. Donna knew. She found out when Sienna was about 8. And instead of doing the right thing, she helped Gerald silence me. Every time I tried to bring it up, they cut me off. Fewer visits, fewer phone calls. They told Marcus and Brooke I was getting confused. They told you. She gestured to the aunts and uncles. That I was slowing down. Aunt June Unk's hand dropped from Donna's arm. Uncle Harold's jaw tightened. A cousin at the far end whispered, "Oh my God." Gerald was still standing, but he looked smaller. His hands were flat on the table, fingers spread like he was trying to hold the surface steady. She doesn't know what she's saying, he said, but his voice had thinned. Ruth met his eyes. I know exactly what I'm saying, Gerald, and I have the DNA results to prove it. Gerald gripped the edge of the table. DNA tests can be wrong. Contaminated samples, lab errors. You can find 100 articles online that say, Dad. My voice came out quieter than I expected, but steady. Sit down. He looked at me. I think for the first time in my life, he didn't recognize the person sitting across from him. He sat. I pulled out my phone. The screen was already open to the results page. I'd had it ready since I walked in. Nathan Holt, I read. 25.3% shared DNA with me. 25.1% with Brooke. 24.8% with Marcus. I looked up. That's half sibling range. All 3 of us. 3 separate kits. 3 separate samples. 3 separate results. Someone tampered with it, Gerald said. But the words had no weight. They fell flat against the table like coins dropped from a low height. The only person who connects all 3 matches, I said, is you. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock in the kitchen. Tick, tick, tick. Marcus sat rigid, staring at his plate like it held instructions. His wife had her hand over her mouth. Brooke was crying silently, not from guilt anymore, but from the slow, sickening recognition that the family she thought she knew was built on a foundation that never existed. Aunt June looked at Gerald, then at Donna, then back at Gerald. Is this true? She asked. Just 3 words, but they carried the weight of 30 years. Gerald opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Donna stared at the centerpiece, a vase of supermarket daisies, like it was the most important object in the universe. The silence answered for them. Ruth placed her hand flat on the manila envelope. Open it, she said to me. I lifted the flap. The envelope was soft with age. The paper inside warm from decades of being held, hidden, and held again. I pulled out 3 items. The first was a photograph. Small, wallet-sized, edges curling inward. A toddler, round face, dark hair, wide brown eyes, staring straight into the camera with that fearless look only 2-year-olds have. On the back in blue ink, Nathan, 23 months. The second was another photograph. This one I recognized instantly, though I'd never seen it before. A young man in a bank uniform, white shirt, navy tie, name badge clipped to the left pocket. He was smiling, open, unguarded, almost boyish. It was my father at 25, long before the deacon title, the front pew posture, the controlled voice. The third was a letter, handwritten, 3 pages, the same neat cursive I'd seen in that desk drawer when I was 14. The same handwriting, the same woman, Karen. Ruth took the 2 photographs, toddler Nathan and young Gerald, and placed them side by side on the table in the space between the salt shaker and the bread basket. Under the overhead light, the resemblance was undeniable. Same jawline, same brow, same cleft chin. Aunt June leaned in. Her hand went to her chest. My God, Gerald, he looks exactly like you. Ruth's voice was steady, but her hands trembled just slightly as she touched the photo of Nathan. This is your nephew, she said, looking around the table. His name is Nathan Hole. He is 31 years old. He is a carpenter. He has a 5-year-old daughter named Lily, and he has never, not once in his life, met anyone from this family. She looked at Gerald. I held this envelope for 29 years. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? Gerald said nothing. His chin dropped to his chest. I need to stop for just a moment because what you just heard, my grandmother holding that envelope for 29 years, that's not a plot twist. That's a woman who was silenced by her own son and still held on to the proof year after year waiting. If you know what it feels like to carry a truth that nobody lets you speak, type Ruth in the comments. And if you're wondering what happened after that dinner, whether my father finally broke, whether Nathan got to meet his family, stay right here, because the next part is the one I still cry about. For a long moment, no one spoke. Ruth's photos sat in the middle of the table like evidence at a trial that nobody had wanted to attend. Then Donna broke. Not the pretty crying from before. Not the practice tears she'd used to guilt me on the phone. This was the kind of crying that starts in the stomach and rips its way upward. Ugly, ragged. Stripped of performance. I knew, she said. Her voice was raw. I've known since Sienna was 8. She told it in fragments like she was pulling shrapnel from a wound. The phone bill. The unfamiliar number. The call she made to Karen. Just one just to confirm. Gerald's begging. The deal. He swore it was over. Swore he'd never contact her again. I believed him. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I had 3 kids, no job, no savings. I hadn't taught in 10 years. Where was I supposed to go? Aunt June Unk's expression had shifted. Not sympathy exactly. Something closer to recognition. I understand the staying, Mom, I said, and I meant it. I don't understand the rest. Donna looked at me. The rest. When Grandma tried to speak up, you helped Dad shut her down. You told us she was confused. You kept her away from her own grandchildren. Donna's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes flickered to Ruth, who sat perfectly still, watching her daughter-in-law with an expression that was not anger, not pity, just patience. The patience of a woman who had waited 3 decades for this exact conversation. I didn't know how to leave, Donna whispered. So, I learned how to pretend. I know, I said. But pretending cost Grandma 30 years, and it cost Nathan a father. Donna covered her face with both hands and didn't speak again for a long time. Gerald stood. His chair scraped the hardwood, a sound that cut through the room like a knife on glass. He didn't look at Ruth. Didn't look at me. Didn't look at the photographs of his son still lying on the table between the bread and the salt. I'm done, he said. His voice was flat, empty. This family is done. He walked to the front door, opened it, and closed it behind him without another word. The latch clicked, and then silence. Donna stayed in her chair, face still buried. Marcus stared at the spot where Gerald had been sitting, his jaw working back and forth like he was chewing on something he couldn't swallow. Then he looked at me. Is this real? You can check your own results, Marcus. All 3 of us match. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and pressed both palms against his temples. I called you a liar. Last week on the phone, I said you were destroying the family. I know. I'm sorry. His voice cracked on the second word. I didn't. I just believed Dad. I always believed, Dad. I reached across the table and put my hand on his forearm. I know, Marcus. That's how it worked. Brooke was still crying quietly, her mascara straw. Aunt June sat with her arms unfolded now, hands flat on the table, looking at Ruth with an expression I can only describe as grief. The kind of grief that comes when you realize you were part of something terrible without knowing it. Uncle Harold cleared his throat. He didn't say anything. He just cleared his throat and stared at the tablecloth. Then Marcus asked the question that mattered. Does he want to meet us? Ruth smiled, the second real smile I'd seen from her in years. I called Nathan that night from Ruth's kitchen, sitting in the same chair where I'd first heard the truth. Ruth sat beside me, her hands clasped on the table, her eyes fixed on the phone like it was a door about to open. Nathan picked up on the second ring. His voice was careful, braced. Sienna, I told them, I said, tonight in front of the whole family, they know. Silence. 3 seconds, 5. How bad? Bad, but honest. For the first time in 30 years, honest. I heard him exhale. A long, shaking breath. The sound of a man letting go of something he'd been gripping since childhood. My father walked out, I told him. But my brother Marcus, your brother Marcus, asked if you'd want to meet the family. Another silence, longer this time. I've got a daughter, Sienna. Her name is Lily. She's 5. She asks me sometimes why she doesn't have grandparents like the other kids at school. My throat tightened. Beside me, Ruth pressed her knuckles to her lips. There's someone here who wants to talk to you, I said. I handed the phone to Ruth. She held it like something fragile. She pressed it to her ear and closed her eyes. Nathan, she said. This is your grandmother. My name is Ruth, and I am so sorry it took this long. I couldn't hear his response, but I watched Ruth's face. The way her chin trembled, the way her eyes squeezed shut, the way she pressed her free hand flat against her chest like she was trying to hold her heart in place. You have a family, she said quietly. It's messy and it's broken, but it's real. And you were always part of it, even when they tried to erase you. In a town like Cedarville, news doesn't travel. It seeps like water through old plaster. Slow, quiet, and impossible to stop once it starts. Nobody posted anything on social media. Nobody called the local paper. But 22 people sat at that dinner table and 22 people went home and told someone, a spouse, a friend, a neighbor at the mailbox the next morning. Within 2 weeks, Pastor Jim at Grace Community Church called Gerald for a private conversation. I don't know exactly what was said. Gerald never told me, but the following Sunday, the front pew seat on the left side, the one Gerald had occupied for 20-plus years, was empty. A short announcement in the church bulletin said Gerald Evans had stepped back from his deacon responsibilities to focus on family matters. Focus on family matters. The politest 4 words in Cedarville's vocabulary. Nobody confronted Gerald publicly. Nobody shamed him at the grocery store. The consequences were quieter than that and in some ways worse. People just stopped inviting him. The Rotary Club dinners, the neighborhood 4th of July planning committee, the men's Bible study on Wednesdays. Doors didn't slam. They just stopped opening. Donna pulled out of the church bake sale committee. She stopped organizing the potluck. I don't know if anyone asked her to step down or if she simply couldn't face the room anymore. Either way, the woman who had built her entire identity around being the heart of Grace Community Church was now sitting at home on Sunday mornings. I didn't celebrate any of it. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt tired mostly and a little bit sad because the Gerald Evans that Cedarville was mourning, the deacon, the family man, the pillar had never actually existed. The truth didn't punish them. It just stopped protecting them. The Evans family split. There's no cleaner way to say it. On one side, Marcus, Brooke, Ruth, Aunt June, and a few cousins who'd been at that dinner and seen the photographs with their own eyes. They didn't all agree on everything. They didn't all forgive the same things at the same speed. But they'd chosen the truth, however ugly, over the performance. On the other side, Uncle Harold, 2 cousins, and a couple of family friends who'd known Gerald for decades and couldn't reconcile the man they'd admired with the man Ruth described. Harold called me 3 days after the dinner. You destroyed your father, he said. His choices destroyed him, Uncle Harold. I just refused to help hide them. He hung up. We haven't spoken since. Donna reached out a few times, always by text. Always starting with some version of, I hope you're doing okay. I recognized the pattern. She was testing the water without committing to the swim. I texted back the same thing each time. Mom, I love you, but I won't pretend anymore. When you're ready to be honest, really honest. I'm here. She never responded to that. Gerald was silent. No calls, no texts, no messages through Marcus or Brooke. Complete radio silence. I'd expected anger, threats, something. Instead, I got absence, which, if I'm being honest, felt like the most Gerald thing possible. When he couldn't control the story, he removed himself from the room. Brooke took it hardest. She carried the guilt of being the one who brought the DNA kits, even though she'd done nothing wrong. I told her, sitting on her couch, holding her hand, you didn't cause this. He did 30 years ago. She nodded. I don't think she fully believed me yet. Nathan came on a Saturday in late August. He drove the 2 hours from Briarfield with Lily buckled in the back seat, her legs swinging, a stuffed rabbit in her lap. I was standing on Ruth's porch when his truck pulled into the driveway. An old blue Chevy, paint peeling at the wheel wells, a toolbox bolted to the bed. He parked and sat there for a full minute, both hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house. Then Lily knocked on the window from inside the truck. "Daddy, are we going in?" He got out, lifted her onto his hip, walked up the porch steps. Ruth was standing in the doorway. She had dressed up, a clean blouse, her pearl earrings, a touch of lipstick. Her hands gripped the doorframe, knuckles white. She looked at Nathan and her face went through something I don't have a word for. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy. It was the look of a woman seeing a ghost who was also a miracle. "You have his face," she said quietly. "But you have Karen's eyes." Nathan's chin dropped, his breath hitched. Lily looked back and forth between them, confused by the silence. Ruth opened her arms. Nathan stepped forward and she held him carefully at first, then tighter, her small frame shaking against his broad one. She pressed her hand to the back of his head the way you do with a baby. And I realized she was holding the child she'd never been allowed to hold. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have fought harder." "You fought enough, Grandma," Nathan said. His voice broke on the word. "You got me here." Lily tugged on Ruth's cardigan. "Are you my great-grandma?" Ruth laughed. A real laugh. Wet and bright and startled. "I am, sweetheart. I absolutely am." 3 months passed. The dust didn't settle. It just shifted. I went back to work at County General. 12-hour shifts, 4 lines, patient charts, the steady rhythm of a job that doesn't care about your family drama. I was grateful for it. Some mornings, the hospital was the only place where I felt like a version of myself I recognized. Nathan started driving to Cedarville every other weekend. He and Ruth fell into a routine. Saturday lunch at her kitchen table, Lily drawing on the floor with crayons Ruth bought at the dollar store. Ruth kept a purple crayon behind her ear because Lily said it was her favorite color. And watching a 78-year-old woman walk around with a purple crayon tucked behind her ear like a carpenter's pencil was the kind of thing that could almost make you forget what it took to get here, almost. Marcus met Nathan in September. They sat on Ruth's porch for an hour, mostly quiet, drinking iced tea and occasionally pointing at something in the yard. Awkward, yes, but real. "I can't believe I have a brother I didn't know about," Marcus said later. "You always did," I told him. "You just didn't know." Brooke came around slowly. She stopped blaming herself after I said it enough times. And by October, she was sending Nathan memes and pictures of her cat, which for Brooke was the highest form of acceptance. Donna texted me once a week, short messages. "Thinking of you. Hope work is going well. No apologies, no manipulation, just presence, however small." Gerald was still silent. I didn't chase him. I didn't call. I didn't send texts into the void, hoping for a response. I had spent my whole life being the family peacekeeper. I was done negotiating traces for wars I didn't start. The call came on a Thursday evening in late October. I was folding laundry, half watching the news when my phone lit up. "Dad." I stared at it for 3 rings. Then I picked up. His voice was different. Stripped of the deacon polish, the controlled authority, the midnight threat register I'd heard my whole life. He sounded tired. Genuinely, deeply tired, like a man who'd been holding a wall up for 30 years and finally felt the weight. "I'm not calling to apologize," he said. "I don't know how. I don't know if I can." I waited. "But I need to ask you something, okay?" A pause. I could hear him breathing heavy, slow. Is Nathan okay?" 4 words. 30 years late. But they were the first time my father had ever spoken Nathan's name in my presence. "He's good, Dad. He's a carpenter. He builds furniture, beautiful stuff, bookshelves, dining tables, and he has a daughter. Her name is Lily. She's 5. Silence long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. "Gerald, I'm here." His voice was thick. "I made a mess, Sienna." "Yeah, Dad, you did." More silence. I could have filled it with anger, with comfort, with a list of everything he'd broken. I didn't. He needed to sit in it. I don't know what happens next, he said. Neither do I. I shifted the phone to my other ear. But when you're ready to meet him, really meet him, not as a threat or a problem, but as your son, call me. And if I'm not ready, I thought about that. Thought about Ruth's 30 years, Nathan's 15, Lily's crayon drawings of families she didn't have. I'm not holding the door open forever, Dad, but it's not locked. Not yet. He thanked me quietly. Then he hung up. I should tell you something I haven't mentioned yet, because if I leave it out, you'll think I'm braver than I am. The night after Gerald's dinner ambush, after the photographs, after Ruth's testimony, after my father walked out, I didn't go home and feel empowered. I went home and fell apart. I sat in my car in my own driveway for 40 minutes. Engine off, headlights off, hands on the wheel. I replayed every face at that table. Aunt June's disgust, Harold's head shaking, Marcus calling me a liar, my mother's practiced tears, my father's controlled rage. I picked up my phone and called Jess, my best friend since nursing school, the only person outside the Evans family who knew the full story. I think I ruined everything, I said. What did you ruin? My family. Jess was quiet for a beat. Then Sienna, you didn't ruin anything. You stopped volunteering to carry their damage. There's a difference. They all hate me. They're not mad at you for breaking the family. They're mad at you for breaking the silence. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. Breaking the silence. That was the crime. In the Evans family, the worst thing you could do wasn't lying. It wasn't cheating. It wasn't abandoning your child. The worst thing was saying it out loud. I cried in that car. I mean, really cried. The ugly kind with snot and gasping and my forehead pressed against the steering wheel. I let it run through me like a fever. And when it was done, I wiped my face, started the engine, and drove to Ruth's house. Because the only thing worse than the pain of telling the truth was the person I would become if I didn't. There's one more voice you need to hear. Not mine, not Ruth's, Karen's. Nathan connected us by phone about a month after the dinner. I didn't know what to expect. I'd built Karen in my head as a shadow, the woman behind the letter, the name behind the initial K, the ghost my father had been running from for 3 decades. She wasn't a ghost. She was a 56-year-old woman with a warm voice, a dry laugh, and absolutely zero interest in Gerald Evans. I'm not looking for anything from your father, she said. No apology, no money, definitely not a relationship. That ship sank 30 years ago, and I'm not interested in diving for the wreck. She told me the short version. She was 25. Gerald was her manager. He told her he was unhappy at home. She believed him. She got pregnant. He told her to handle it. She refused. He told her if she ever spoke his name, he'd make sure no one in Cedarville hired her again. So, I left. She said, moved to Briarfield. Had Nathan in a hospital where nobody knew me. Raised him alone. Got my GED. Worked every job you can think of. Her voice didn't waver. This wasn't a woman asking for sympathy. This was a woman giving testimony. Plain, steady, done. He told me he loved me, she said. Then he told me to disappear, and I did. For Nathan's sake, I did. I asked her if she was okay with the family knowing now. Honey, I've been okay for years. I didn't need your father to be okay. I just needed someone, anyone, to stop pretending my son doesn't exist. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and stared at the wall for 20 minutes. Karen Holt raised a good man alone without a single dollar or word of support from my father. That's not a sad story. That's a strong one. Brooke told me in November she'd stopped by our parents' house to drop off some groceries. Brooke was still doing that, still trying to keep some thread of normally alive. And she noticed something on the kitchen counter. A printed application form for a part-time library aide position at the Cedarville Public Library. Mom filled it out, Brooke said over the phone. Like actually filled it out. Name, education history, references. She even listed her old teaching credential. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Sienna, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Donna hadn't told me. She hadn't called to announce it or ask for praise or use it as a bargaining chip. She'd just done it quietly. The way people do things when they're not performing for an audience. I thought about what 30 years of financial dependence does to a person. How it traps you. How it makes you complicit in things you'd never choose if you had any other option. I didn't forgive everything my mother had done. I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Ruth's 30 years of exile. The She's Getting Confused campaign. The tears weaponized at every family dinner. Those weren't survival instincts. Those were choices. But filling out a library application at 58 after 30 years out of the workforce. That was also a choice. A small one, a quiet one, but it pointed somewhere different. Did she get the job? I asked. I don't know. She didn't mention it. I just saw the form. I thought about calling Donna. I decided not to. Not yet. Because the most important changes don't need an audience. They just need to happen. Change isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a library application sitting on a kitchen counter, still warm from the printer. I should back up for a moment to the night before I first video called Nathan. The night I sat in my living room with my laptop open doing something I probably shouldn't admit to but that every single one of you would do in my position. I looked him up. Nathan Hole, Briarfield, Ohio. Facebook profile. Sparse the way men's Facebook profiles always are. A handful of photos spread over a few years. One stopped me. Nathan kneeling in a workshop sanding a small wooden bookshelf. Lily was sitting on the counter beside him, legs swinging, holding a paintbrush smeared with sky blue paint. She was grinning at the camera. He was grinning at her. Behind them, the workshop wall was covered in tools, hung neatly on pegboard, organized, cared for, each one in its place. I zoomed in on his face, the jawline, Gerald's, the set of the brow, Gerald's. But the smile was different, warmer, less guarded, like a version of my father that might have existed if he'd chosen honesty over image. If he'd stayed instead of running. There was another photo. Nathan carrying Lily on his shoulders at a county fair, her cotton candy held high like a trophy, his hand gripping her ankle to keep her steady. A single dad, a 5-year-old, a Tuesday evening at a fair. Nothing fancy, nothing performed. I thought about my father's world's best dad apron, the one he wore at the reunion while standing at the grill flipping burgers for a family that included exactly none of his abandoned son's memories. I closed the laptop. I didn't need to see anything else. I already knew who Nathan Hole was. He was the Evans who never got to be one. The photograph was Brooke's idea. Of course, it was a Sunday afternoon in November. Ruth's front porch, the one with the creaky third step, and the wind chime Grandpa had hung before I was born. The maple tree in the yard had gone full gold, the kind of color that only lasts a few days before the wind takes it. Brooke set up her phone on a tripod she'd ordered specifically for this. Marcus stood on the left, hands in his pockets, looking slightly uncomfortable in the way older brothers do when asked to participate in anything sentimental. Brooke bounced into place beside him. I stood next to her. Nathan held Lily on his hip. She was wearing a purple dress, her favorite color obviously, and clutching a crayon drawing she'd made of the whole family. Stick figures, big sun, a house with a red door that looked suspiciously like Ruth's. Ruth stood in the center. She had her pearl earrings on again. She held Nathan's arm with one hand and Lily's tiny fingers with the other. Everybody ready? Brooke asked. Wait, Ruth said. She looked at the group. Her son was missing. Her daughter-in-law was missing. The family she'd spent 60 years building was incomplete, and she knew it. But she smiled anyway. A full, open, unflinching smile. This is the first honest family photo we've ever taken, she said. Brooke snapped it. I set it as my phone wallpaper that night. The image isn't perfect. Marcus is mid-blink. Lily is looking at a squirrel. Nathan's eyes are red from crying 5 minutes earlier. It is the most beautiful picture I've ever seen. It's not the family I thought I had. It's the family I actually have. And for the first time in my life, every single person in the frame knows exactly who they are. So here's what I want to leave you with. Because I know someone listening to this is sitting in a version of my story right now. Maybe you're the peacekeeper. The one who smooths things over at Thanksgiving. The one who changes the subject when it gets uncomfortable. The one who carries everyone else's secrets in your chest like shrapnel and calls it loyalty. I was that person for 34 years. And I want to tell you, keeping the peace is not peace if it costs you the truth. I set 3 boundaries after that dinner. I wrote them down on a notepad and stuck them to my refrigerator where I could see them every morning before my shift. 1. I will have a relationship with Gerald only when he acknowledges Nathan. Not apologizes, acknowledges, says his name, admits he exists. 2. I will have a relationship with Donna only when she stops weaponizing her tears. When she can sit across from me and have a conversation that doesn't involve guilt, manipulation, or the phrase, after everything I've done for this family. 3. Nathan and Lily are welcome in my life always. No conditions, no probation period. They are family and they always were. My grandmother held the truth for 30 years. She taught me something I'll carry for the rest of my life. The truth doesn't destroy families. Lies do. And silence. Silence is just a lie with a longer fuse. I didn't blow up my family. I just stopped helping it stay buried. And the woman who made it all possible, the one with the purple crayon behind her ear and the manila envelope she'd been holding since before I was born. She's sitting on her porch right now in her own house, on her own terms, exactly where she belongs.